For some people, when facing almost certain death, fate intervenes and decides that it is not their time to go. In this video, we look at 5 amazing stories of human survival. Wenseslao Moguel was a Mexican who was captured on the 18th of March 1915 after being suspected of taking part in the Mexican Revolution. He was summarily sentenced to death by firing squad without trial. He was shot 8 times in the body and then once in the head at point blank range by the commanding officer to guarantee his death, or so it seemed. There are differing stories as to how he survived. Some say he was found alive but unconscious amongst the bodies of the others that had been executed and given medical attention to recover. Others say he managed to crawl away to a church a few blocks away, where he was found by a church member who took him home and looked after him until he was well again. One thing that is known for sure, and that is he went on to live a full life until his death in 1975 at the age of 85. His remarkable story was brought to the world on July the 16th, 1937, when he appeared on Ripley's Believe It or Not radio show on NBC with the founder, Robert Ripley. On Christmas Eve 1971, 17-year-old Juliane Koepcke boarded the Lansa Flight 508 bound from Lima in Peru to Pucallpa, also in Peru, with her mother, Maria Koepcke. They were returning home for Christmas to see her father, Hans-Willhelm Koepcke, at the nature reserve which she had founded a few years earlier. The plane, a Lockheed Electra turboprop, took off and about 40 minutes into the flight entered a violent thunderstorm. Juliane Koepcke said that there was a lot of turbulence and lightning, and after about 20 minutes the plane was struck by lightning which set fire to the right-hand engine. The Lockheed turboprop wasn't built to fly in strong turbulence, and due to its very rigid wings, shortly after the lightning strike, the right-hand wing and part of the left wing broke away from the plane. The plane then broke into 2 pieces. Juliane, who was strapped into a bench seat, found herself falling from the plane at a height of about 10,000 feet. She said she remembered seeing the rainforest canopy approaching before she lost consciousness and then woke up the next day in the forest. Although she had broken her collarbone and had deep cuts to her arms and legs, she was, after a period of time, able to move around. Initially she was looking for her mother, and while doing this she found a bag of candy that had fallen from the plane too. This would be her only food for the next 10 days. Her father had taught her survival skills and said that if you ever get lost, all you need to do is find a river and follow it downstream and you'll always find people there. During her journey to escape the forest, she came across the bodies of 3 other passengers from the plane, still strapped into their seat and buried headfirst into the forest floor. After several more days of travel, she found a small boat and a hut by the river used by lumbermen. She fell asleep in a hut and awoke to the sounds of voices. The men were startled by the sight of a white-skinned blonde girl in the hut and thought she was a water spirit. She managed to tell them in Spanish what had happened, and they took her to a lumber village further down the river. From here, a local pilot volunteered to take her to a hospital in Pucallpa, run by missionaries, where she was reunited with her father. He then went on to help with the search parties to locate the crash site. It was later found out that up to 14 of the passengers had survived the crash and the fall to the forest, including her mother Maria. However, they had all died over the following days whilst awaiting to be rescued due to the severity of their injuries. When it comes to the great explorers of the Antarctic, most people will think of Scott, Shackleton and Amundsen, but one of the most amazing survival stories comes from the Australian explorer Douglas Mawson. Mawson set off on his expedition at the end of 1911, when Scott and Amundsen were racing to the South Pole. In fact, Scott had asked Mawson to join him on his ill-fated Terra Nova expedition, but he turned it down to lead his own expedition to map an unexplored area of the Antarctic continent. Mawson had worked as a geologist with Scott's rival Shackleton between 1908 and 1909. Mawson was also in a 3-man team which was the first to reach the Earth's magnetic South Pole. The expedition stayed through the Antarctic winter of 1911 at a camp at Cape Denison, which Mawson described as the windiest place on Earth, where the average wind speed was 50 miles an hour and with gusts of up to 200 miles an hour. When the three-man team of Douglas Mawson, Xavier Mertz and Lieutenant Belgrave Ninnis started, they had 5 weeks of excellent progress. However, the first disaster struck whilst crossing the Ninnis Glacier. Mawson was on the sledge, with Mertz on skis and Ninnis jogging alongside the second sled. It was at this point when Ninnis fell through a snow bridge into an unseen deep crevasse. The party's 6 best dogs, most of the rations, their tent and other essential supplies fell into the massive crevasse. Mertz and Mawson spotted 1 dead and 1 injured dog on a ledge 165 feet below them, but Ninnis was never seen again. After a brief service, Mawson and Mertz turned back immediately, and with just 1 week's provisions for a 4-week journey for 2 men and no dog food for the huskies, they were forced to sacrifice the remaining sled dogs to feed themselves and the other dogs. This, ironically, only made things a lot worse. The men's condition quickly worsened, with Mertz, once a champion skier, rapidly deteriorating with skin, hair and nail loss, diarrhea and finally falling into madness. Mertz suffered further seizures before falling into a coma and dying on the 8th of January 1913. It wasn't known at the time, but husky liver contains very high levels of vitamin A, which affected both men adversely, but Mertz more so because he ate more of the livers. Mawson continued the final 100 miles, but he too fell through the lid of a crevasse, but was saved by the harness attached to his sled, which was wedged in the ice above him. Though weak and frostbitten, he managed to climb out of the crevasse and finally made it back to Cape Denison, only to find he was just 2 hours late for the boat which had set off after thinking the men had been lost. Luckily, 6 men had stayed behind to look for the missing party, so Mawson was forced to stay a second winter until the ship could return in the following spring. Mawson returned to Australia and years later was knighted and went on to lead other Antarctic expeditions. He died at the age of 76 in 1958. The 28th of July 1945 was meant to be the last day of work for Betty Lou Oliver at her job as an elevator operator in the Empire State Building, but it turned out to be almost her last day on Earth. That Saturday morning, William Franklin Smith Jr. was piloting a B-25 bomber on a routine personnel transport mission from Bedford Army Field to Newark Airport, New Jersey, when he became disoriented in thick fog and turned left instead of right when passing the Chrysler Building. At 9:40 a.m. in the morning, the plane crashed into the north side of the Empire State Building between the 78th and 80th floors. The impact created an 18-foot by 20-foot hole in the building, and the force of the crash sent one engine clean through the building and out the south side before landing on the next block 900 feet below. The other engine and part of the landing gear broke into an elevator shaft and fell to the bottom. 14 people, including 3 people on the plane, were killed, and the elevator operator, Betty Lou Oliver, was seriously injured. When rescuers reached Betty, they put her in the elevator to get medical help, but what they didn't know was that the engine that had gone down the lift shaft had cut many of the cables, so when the doors shut, the elevator car plunged 75 stories, or approximately 1,000 feet, to the bottom of the lift shaft into a sub-basement. The lift was saved from a sudden and devastating stop by the huge coils of cable at the bottom of the shaft, which had fallen after being cut by the engine. Betty survived the fall in the elevator car, but had to be cut from the wreckage, and despite having a broken back and legs, she fully recovered from her double escape from death within 8 months, and went on to have 3 children and 7 grandchildren. On October 28, 2005, 3 fishermen, Jesus Vidania, Lucio Rendon and Salvador Ordonez, set sail from the Mexican port of San Blas, Nayarit, to catch sharks in a 28-foot fiberglass boat. This should have been a routine fishing trip, but it turned into one of the longest survival stories for anyone being lost at sea. On the way to the fishing grounds, the boat had a mechanical problem and was caught in strong winds which blew them into the path of a northern equatorial current which crosses the Pacific Ocean from Mexico to the Philippines. The boat had no radio, so they couldn't call for help, and they soon found themselves drifting out into the Pacific Ocean in a boat without hot food, sunscreen, bathroom, or any engines. Although there were 3 men in the boat when they were rescued, it turned out there were 5 men originally. The boat owner and another man had hired the 3 fishermen for the fishing trip, but some think that they were picking up drugs, something which the 3 survivors vehemently denied. Vidana said that after they realised they couldn't get back, they fashioned a sail out of blankets and were blown along by the wind and the current westwards. They were eventually picked up by a Taiwanese tuna fishing vessel on August 9, 2006, over 9 months later near the Marshall Islands and approximately 5,500 miles from where they started out on the other side of the Pacific Ocean. They said that they had survived by catching fish, turtles and seabirds, which they ate raw, and as it rained almost every day, they had fresh water to drink. The 3 survivors said that the 2 men that had hired them, including the boat owner, couldn't eat the raw food and they were constantly sick, and they had eventually starved to death within a couple of months of being at sea. When the men were rescued, they were very thin and hungry and suffering from exposure to the sun and salt water, but otherwise they were healthy. The men returned to Mexico as heroes and were reunited with their families. After a period of recovery and undaunted by their ordeal, they returned to their lives as shark fishermen. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, then don't forget to please thumbs up and subscribe for more, and if you have any ideas for videos you'd like to see, then please let us know in the comments below.